Come on in. We need more targets. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for coming out this morning to join us here with the Cornwall Historical Society. We are Company F, 14th Connecticut Volunteer Infantry. We are a reenactment organization that comes from all over the state, from the four corners at the center, just as Company F had soldiers from all around the state. But the majority of Company F was formed in New Britain, Connecticut, and they elected their captain to be Captain Glynn, who happened to be from Rocky Hill. The gentleman liked him. He ended up becoming the captain of our company. Unfortunately, he was also killed in the very first battle at Antietam, September 17, 1862, which was our baptism of fire. We were formed in Hartford at Camp Foot. We were marched out of the Camp Foot onto steamers down the Connecticut River on August 25th, and by September 17th we were in battle. In fact, one thing that we've discovered through checking the history records, that the 14th Connecticut left Connecticut without arms. They did not get their arms until they were down at Washington, D.C. What we represent is one company of the 14th Connecticut. There were 10 companies of 100 men each for a 1,000-man regiment. That's what was on paper. And pretty much that's what they left Hartford, Connecticut with. By the time of Gettysburg, which was the 150th anniversary last year, they were down to 160 men. And there was no drafts at that time, so the regiments were dwindled down to barely nothing until Abraham Lincoln called for the drafts, which initially were welcomed with draft riots. So, by 1863, 160 men divided by 10 is about 16 men per company. So we're a little smaller than that today, but this would be the size of a company on the average by the time of 1863. As you can see, our uniforms are mixed in color. That was based on manufacturing. They had certain criteria to meet for the contract, but sometimes the dyes were not quite the same, the manufacturing material was not quite the same. But what we see here today, I believe we all have what we call a sack coat. I'm going to go through the uniform, then the leathers and the rifle, and then we'll do a little drill and our firing demonstration. And I'll be taking questions at certain points. What they start off with on their heads is what they call a forage cap. That is made of wool. They could use them for foraging if they were camped here and then go into the surrounding countryside, forage for berries, eggs, whatever. Their coat is a sack coat, a 4-button sack coat. Easy manufactured by the middle of the war. If you're a frock coat, which was a formal, tighter dress coat, basically what I'm wearing with a skirt, as they wore out, this is what you would be reissued. It's a sack coat. 4 buttons, looser fit, easier to march in. Their trousers are sky blue. The sack coat is also wool. Sky blue trousers, also made of wool, and then wool or cotton socks, and that was basically the uniform. Wool was a sturdy material back then. That was the choice of material to be worn, manufactured to be uniforms of the day. Accoutrement, well, we'll go with the rifle. 14th Connecticut was issued down in Washington, the model 1861 Springfield rifled musket. Somebody want to step out as a volunteer? This was a muzzle-loading rifled musket. Rifled meaning there were 3 grooves that were put inside the barrel, that when you fired the mini ball, it would cause it to spin, making it more accurate. It was about 9 pounds. It was accurate up to 300 yards. You could still hit a target that you were aiming at. Deadly accurate at 150, and a lot of times they were fighting at 100 yards apart, sometimes even less. It was a percussion fired, which meant, well, I'll pass around the mini ball. It was a 58 caliber lead Burton ball. A lot of people call it a mini ball. You may know it as a mini ball. Actually, it was a Burton design. I'll pass that around. Just make sure you get it back to me at the end. Again, 58 caliber. That would be put down the muzzle of the rifle. No, I have one in. I have a percussion cap that I'm going to pass around. This was like a top hat that President Lincoln wore. It was stamped out of brass. It has a paste inside of it. This one happens to be scraped out. It's fired. But it would have a fulminated mercury paste inside that when the hammer hit it under compression, it would explode and send the flame into the breech of the muzzle, igniting the powder and sending that mini ball that's coming around out the end of the muzzle. The rifle fired 60 grains would be in the cartridge. We have a cartridge? That's one thing I don't have. We lost that. Yeah. Basically, they had a paper cartridge which was manufactured with 60 grains of black powder and that mini ball that's going around in it. And they would tear off the tail with their teeth, pour the black powder down the muzzle of the rifle musket, squeeze out the lead mini ball, push it in with their thumb. Then they would put the percussion cap on, which we'll show you and explain, and then the rifle would be ready to fire. That's the paper cartridge that they would be issued. You see some green boxes around. That's how they were sent to the front lines. That would be broken open and handed out the packets of 10 rounds, 10 of those cartridges to each soldier, depending on how much they were going to go into battle. Usually 40, 60 rounds they would be issued. One thing you notice on the hat, some have brass, F for their company letter. Some have a white trefoil. Anyone have a blue trefoil? Not today. When the 14th was assigned to the 2nd Corps of the Army of the Potomac, they were in the 3rd Division. If you looked at any of our posters, the corps were broken down into 3 divisions: red, white, and blue, 1st, 2nd, and 3rd. We were originally in the 3rd, so we had blue trefoils. By 1864, with those numbers of regiments decreasing, they reorganized the Army of the Potomac, and we went into the 2nd Division, so we were issued white trefoils. Some who were in the 1st Division would have a red trefoil. It was a way of identifying the regiments and brigades out in the field through field glasses. Okay, so we got the uniform. The rifle, again, 9 pounds. There was accoutrements that went along with that rifle to help it function properly, namely the cartridge and percussion caps. So, can we have a soldier step back out, Joe? On the front of the soldier, he's got a waist belt on. On the left side is a scabbard containing the bayonet for that rifle. On his right side is his cap pouch. That contains that brass, a whole mess of brass percussion caps will be in that cap pouch. On his right hip is a leather cartridge box. That contains those cartridges, that cartridge that I held out. It holds 40 cartridges. And on his right hip, he has his haversack, which contains his rations and his cooking utensils, knife, fork, spoon, cup, and his canteen, which holds his water supply on those long, hard marches going from battlefield to battlefield. Lastly, all those accoutrements are made of leather. The along with his brogans, or his booties as they were called. Leather shoes, leather soles, leather tops, leather laces. Thanks, Joe. So any questions right now in regards to the uniform or the rifled musket? Anything?
I see the rifle has a long
ramrod?
stick. Yeah, what is,
That's
they have to
what,
clean it every time?
it's not for cleaning. We'll show you how it was loaded. It comes into the loading of the weapon.
Oh.
Any other questions? Uniform, musket. Okay, what we'll do is now we'll do the manual of arms. There's different ways that the soldiers will carry the weapon. Right now the soldiers are at in-place rest. If I call them to attention, attention! They bring the rifle back up, they dress themselves. Shoulder, arms. This is one way of carrying the weapon, either on the march or if you're standing guard duty. But that 9 pounds will stretch that right arm after a certain amount of time. So another way of carrying the manual arms, which they were trained in over and over, would be support arms. Puts it over on the left side. They support it on the forearm of their left arm. It gives their right arm a break, a little rest. This is a very comfortable way of carrying the arms. A lot of times you'll see photographs of soldiers on guard mount, guard duty with this, maybe with the bayonet up on top. Shoulder, arms. You come back to the right shoulder. Another way of carrying the weapon is right shoulder shift, arms. You put it up on the right shoulder, and they actually, in some of the maneuvers that they do, requires them to run at a quick pace. When they go into those run positions, as this soldier is demonstrating, the rifle automatically goes to right shoulder shift. It balances up there. You would think it wouldn't, but it does. Shoulder, arms. Another way, if we were going under heavy trees and bush like this, the rifle's sticking up, especially if we have the bayonets on, or hitting the branches and all. So a way that they could go under low brush and tree limbs would be trail, arms. They bring the rifle down, especially again if the bayonet was on there, they can go under low trees and brush. Shoulder, arms. And then if in foul weather, rain or snow, if they're on the march, again, you've got black powder and a mini ball down there. You don't want any moisture or rain getting down your open barrel. Another way of carrying the weapon would be secure arms. They bring it over on the right side, turn it upside down, bring the muzzle downward, and that protects any moisture getting in the barrel from the top or where the percussion cap would go, which we'll explain where that is. Shoulder, arms. That's pretty much it. Another way, if an officer of the day is going by, or a general, and they were on guard mount in position like this, in this formation, which happens to be 2 rows, front rank and rear rank, which will come into play when they fire, would be present arms. I'm sure you've seen soldiers to this day in the modern army do present arms. Shoulder, arms. Border, arms. In place, rest. At this position, they can talk quietly, they can drink water if they need to, which you guys can do. Any questions about the manual of arms? Anything? Does anyone want to join us?
We hear the men from Cornwall are very brave.
Excuse me, do the officers have revolvers, or were there any repeating arms used during the war?
They could. One thing about the officers versus the enlisted is that the officers had to buy their uniforms. So you might see variations in the uniforms, the hat wear, a pistol. They may carry a revolver. It depends on the officer. I would think most of them would. They have a sword for somewhat defense, but the sword is more for guiding when they're marching and all, rather than defense. My weapon would be the company. This is my weapon that I would direct down to the field.
Were there any repeating arms used during the war?
Repeating arms?
Yes.
Yes. Sergeant?
The question, ladies and gentlemen, the question asked was, were repeating arms used during the war? Repeating arms were in their infancy during the Civil War, so you don't see them used as much as some of us think they may have been. For instance, the Spencer rifle, Spencer had all it could do to keep up with carbine contracts. Plus it had issues trying to get the ammunition made correctly. All right. Then you had the Henry rifle that was tested at the Springfield Armory by Master Armor Erskine Allen, and through 160 rounds, the rifle failed 3 times. So that was not generally issued. However, right after the war is over, the United States Army does go to breech loaders, not repeaters, single-shot breech loaders.
So they were still fighting the idea of changing over from muzzle loading to multi-firing, either a revolver or like the Spencer with the tube.
And the carbines, were they used by the cavalry or?
Yes, the carbines are used by the cavalry. Another reason why he asked about breech loaders, typically a breech loading round back then was ignited through the rim. We call them today rim fire cartridges. Back then they called them side fire cartridges. If a cartridge is ignited through the rim, that means the rim has got to be filled with some kind of explosive mixture. That makes the cartridge inherently weak. Therefore, the propellant